Hey, GA.
Thank you for coming.
It just kicked me out.
I didn't notice. Did I kick you out? Sorry about that. That's
Yeah, it's
rude.
okay.
Um, so is it okay if I'm recording this?
Yes, it is.
And then is it okay if camera on?
Yes, camera's fine.
Okay, thank you so much.
Of course. How are you
Yeah,
today?
so good. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good. So I would like to ask you, I know you are, this is not a coaching session from you, but I would like to ask you about your homeschooling experience as you homeschooling your children. So before going that, I would like to ask you to introduce yourself, who you are, and your background, everything, like where you
Okay.
are.
All right. So I am Carol Keith. I live just west of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on the east coast of the United States. And I have three children, a boy, girl, and a boy. The oldest of which is a health and phys ed, health and wellness instructor at a local high school. My daughter is in HR, fairly local as well. And my youngest son is a criminal defense attorney in New York. Um, that's the family. So the statement for that is they all survived homeschooling with mom. Um, so my original background long ago was I was a professional musician and I taught music at Rice University in Houston. And uh, sometime after that, when we moved around. Um, I We moved actually to the East Coast at that point in time. So obviously, I left Houston and started having children. So I started working then part time with different musical venues. And the children were about 6, 8, and 10 when I did about a 12-year stint in law. And at that point in time, was introduced to coaching and mediating, which I found that I loved. And what worked wonderfully for that was when you have children and you're trying to homeschool them, doing something that has more flexibility than being in a full-time job was very appealing to me. So that's sort of where my coaching journey came from. But so I was looking at some of the questions that you had, and my one of my favorites, of course, is what in the heck brought you to the idea of homeschooling? And that's sort of a two-pronged response. One is that my husband and I had really talked about it for some time with regard to how the school systems were operating at that point, the school districts. And we had some concerns. So homeschooling was an option that we looked at the time. So my children are in their early to mid 30s now. So at the time, 30 years ago, it was not a well-known thing to do. It was things that often, homeschooling was often something that people did for religious reasons or anti-public school reasons. Um, and curriculums were not wildly useful. It was a lot of develop it yourself kind of thing. Having a background as a university instructor, I was not unfamiliar with the idea of pedagogy, but I certainly didn't think that I was anywhere near qualified to do some of the sciences and the maths, and even history was not something that I paid a great deal of attention to when I was in school either. Um, But the other thing that sort of tipped the scales for us was our next door neighbors had children that went to kindergarten and first grade about the time that ours were toddlers. And what I noticed surprisingly was a very distinct difference between how they interacted with us as adults from the moment they went to school. And as I did more reading and studying and observing, I realized that one of the reasons, the strong reasons that we wanted to homeschool was that our children were losing or would be losing the ability to converse with people of all ages and to relate to people of all ages. And my parents and my in-laws and my grandparents were still very much involved in their lives. They were all still alive at that point. Um, and it, doing the research and talking to other people, it dawned on me that when you spend 30 hours a week with a group of your peers, you're going to be engaging with the group of the peers more consistently. And so behavioral patterns will come from that. And my thought process was the world doesn't function that way. You will never find a job again where you are strictly with your peers. You have to learn to deal with all generations and to understand something about the generations and their motivations and why. So one of the other neat things that came out of that for me was I became very much embroiled and trained in intergenerational communication and conflict. So part of my coaching practice is intergenerational conflict and coaching as a result of the fact that that's where a lot of workplace problems happen because there's no understanding of, for example, the traditional generation is one that valued group over individuality, and the boomer generation spent more time with individuality, and of course then that it just keeps snowballing down through the generation. So I think one of the things that I see now reaping the rewards of homeschooling now that my children are adults and functioning in the work environment is that they really benefited from having connections through all generations. And I see it particularly with well, certainly my daughter in HR has to deal with it. But my youngest son, as a criminal defense attorney, has quite an interesting practice that deals with people of all ages and all socioeconomic backgrounds. And I would definitely attribute the fact that he was not consistently, any of them were not consistently exposed to 30 hours a week with your peers. Um, in addition to, and I want to say this positively and not negatively, but in addition to the entertainment that kind of takes place in a public school system by virtue of the fact that you're working with crowds of people as opposed to individual. So that would be my long-winded answer to what the heck brought me into homeschooling. So,
So how long did it take for you to gather all kind of idea, what you have been doing as a coach? You said having connections with all generations, intergenerational conflict with coaching. So that's what you have been seeing. But how did you decide, okay, this is it, like I really want to homeschool?
well, I think the reason that we did decide that at the time was because we felt that it was the best for the children for the reasons that I already gave you. That it was both of us were very strong believers in the fact that you sometimes become the company you keep. So you do want to watch and be self-aware of the company you keep. And we decided at that point that it was most important for our children to be selectively exposed to other people. But I think our biggest reason behind it was not to limit them as much as it was to make sure that their exposure was to people of all walks of life and people of all generations. That was important.
So it sounds like it was a quick decision for you.
No, not at all. But again, remember when your children are toddlers, you do have some time to make that decision. And we did a lot
Right.
of research. We did a lot
Hmm.
of research. We did a lot of observing. We belonged to a church, for example, where you were able to help in the nursery and help in the different age groups. And so that was a lot of observing that we were doing as new parents. And all of that served to assist us in our decision making.
Mm.
Yeah,
So got combined together everything.
all of it. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So how long would you say like did it take for you
To make
to
that
make a
decision,
to make that decision?
well, gee, I think I would say several years. I think
Oh,
one of the reasons for that was that again, homeschooling was not something that was as accessible as it is now.
right.
And now a lot of there's curriculums all over the place. There are homeschooling groups that gather at churches and other venues for, let's say, Tuesday is science day and Thursday is phys ed day for the kinds of things that you don't necessarily get when you're just at home with mom. None of that existed when we started. So we had to think about it very carefully because it was more of a pioneering moment and movement at that space than it is now. But I do still think that some of those same decisions, the foundation for our decisions still exist. I think it's an unnatural environment for children to be 18 years of 30 hours a week with your peers. And I have seen with grown children the difference in how my 30 somethings behave compared to other 30 somethings, which I'm not saying with a pat on my own back. I'm just saying it's just very obvious that the comfort level with all kinds of people and all generations is very much embedded in my children.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And so we learned some very interesting things in the process. Um, we decided in a kind of funny way, but we decided that we were going to create a school separation environment in our household. So we actually went to a local thrift store and bought our children uniforms, which were just navy bottoms and white tops, but they had to get dressed every morning for school. And then we would just go down to our lower level where I had school set up. And my father had graciously, crafted all kinds of fancy desks and workspaces for them. So it was really kind of fun. They had their own area. And we did lots of things, lots of hands-on things, lots of field trips, but we separated our life outside of school within the home so that they understood the concept. Um, and our thought process behind that too was the fact that that's the way work will be ongoing. So if you want to integrate into the work world, you need to be prepared to get yourself up at a certain time, get yourself dressed, show up on time. Um, I really have never gone back to ask um, my other homeschooling friends what they thought about that. Maybe they thought we were weird, but the kids gravitated toward it. They really did. Um, I think one of the most interesting things for me to learn was the different learning styles. So my oldest, like I am, was a visual learner. So he very much gravitated toward worksheets, workbooks, stickers, finishing this, that, and the other thing. My daughter is an auditory learner, and my youngest is a kinesthetic learner. So he was the child that I taught to write cursive in a 9 by 13 pan of cornmeal because he simply loved to get his fingers into things, which when we started homeschooling, he was still a toddler. Um, but it was amazing how, so I loved, it was challenging, but I loved the creativity that I had to work toward to keep each of them engaged differently. My youngest wanted nothing to do with worksheets. So it was challenging, but good challenging.
So I'm assuming around that time, excuse me, so 30 years ago, right? Like you didn't have not many resources like we have today. And I
Correct.
was curious, like, how did you figure out not knowing the different learning styles exist? Did you already know from your music teacher background, or like, how did you figure out, oh, my son and I are visual learner, oh, my daughter is auditory, she's a kinesthetic learner. How did you figure out?
Well, I am a voracious studier of human behavior. So so I did a lot, and I still do a lot of reading, studying, trying to learn. And then I had to do a lot of searching through different kinds of curriculums. I certainly would say that my natural tendency would be to gravitate toward one prepackaged curriculum that came with everything and including the stickers. Um, but that did not work for my daughter or my youngest son. There were aspects of it that were useful, but I had to be more creative. So I had to keep learning and researching. There are curriculums out there, and I imagine there's even more now. What I wound up doing with my younger two is more of a piecemeal type of put it together myself, which was not in my comfort zone, but I did need to learn to do that. Um, and that takes a lot of work. The other thing that was a lot of work was at the time we lived in the state of Delaware. And Delaware requires that you turn in a very detailed notebook of what you've accomplished. So we
Wow.
had to have we had to have test scores, we had to have pictures of things we did, we had to have some reviews. So those, and I still have those notebooks. It was very detailed. It was required by the state that if you were going to keep your children out of public school, um, and didn't have any kind of proof that they were going to private school, that you had to provide what they were looking for. So each one of them has a 3-inch binder for each year, which is fun to look back on because we had lots of fun, um, trips for different places and things like that. But yeah, it was a lot of work 30 some odd years ago in the state of Delaware because of their requirements. Um, but worth it. The relationship that I have with my children, as a result of doing that is well worth the exhaustion. And
Wow.
the other thing that was really fun about it too was we were able to do so many other experiential activities that you don't necessarily get to do when you're in a classroom all day long. Um, we were for a period of time transferred to England, and we lived in England for a while. And so the children we did a whole study on medieval history because we were right in the middle of it. And we went to castles. We watched all kinds of live demonstrations of what knights did, and and that kind of government and all that sort of thing. I mean, I we came home with far more swords and shields than I ever needed. But at the same time, it was the children have never forgotten that experience because um, we we were literally immersed in medieval history. Um, and I think back to my own education, and I think of the number of things that I wish I had truly paid attention to, but I had no frame of reference. It was just a class that I had to take. So that's one of the lovely things that I really appreciate about homeschooling is being able to participate in experiential learning. Yeah.
Wow. I'm still shocked to hear that 3-inch binder every year for every child. And I wonder how many binders you have in your house.
I have a lot, although I have given, as the children, which they're definitely not children now, they have children of their own. Um, as they are moving into houses that are larger, they're taking them because I don't need to keep storing them. But they're they're sort of glorified scrapbooks in a way. It's history of their
Yeah,
lives and what we
yeah.
did. And um and even especially living in England, we actually lived in a castle. There were
Oh,
there were apartments made on the grounds of a castle for the servants originally, and
wow.
they had turned them into sort of short-term rentals because we were just staying there for about a year, so it was just a rental situation. But the kids could play on the grounds of a castle, and mind you, it's a disintegrating castle. It's not alive. It was not a live castle at that point. But
Okay.
the little boys to be able to play with their swords on the grounds of a castle was just, they all have fabulous experiences from that. And my oldest son was also part of the Philadelphia Boys Choir, which is an internationally renowned young men's chorus. And he traveled China and Korea when he was 10 years old. So those kinds of experiences would not have happened if we hadn't had the opportunity for homeschooling, because their learning was all, I just love the fact that learning is part of everyday life, as opposed to it's a thing you go to and you either like it or you hate it. Um, my kids just learned to love learning, and I think that's probably the greatest thing that I've ever received from that.
I can see your passion coming out as you talk
Oh,
about, yeah,
yeah,
reflect everything like,
yeah. I
wow,
mean, it was
gorgeous.
hard work. It was definitely hard work, and there were certainly days where people didn't feel like putting their uniforms on, or we had those days. But I think overall, I think even my children would agree that overall it was a great life experience.
Yeah, sounds like, I mean, it sounds like fascinating life, would you say? Like, who can live in the castle when,
Yeah.
like, seriously, like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that way. I've heard like some people do the travel homeschooling or something, but I've never heard somebody lived in the castle,
Well,
maybe.
we did because my husband was transferred at that time. So I
Yeah,
mean,
but
that was not
still,
it was not by choice, but it was a neat blessing. It really was that.
wow. Yeah.
What better way? Because quite frankly, when you think about it, and I know that when we went to school, public school, medieval history was probably middle school or high school. I don't remember, but I certainly don't remember it coming to life like the children were able to experience, where you actually saw what a dungeon looked like. And you actually would go when we took a tour one day to the Tower of London and realized that, this is where they kept people. The boys got to put the armor on and feel how heavy it really was. And
Yeah.
it just, that whole time period. And the kids, quite frankly, when they went to high school, then they did go to public school for high school,
Okay.
but actually private school, um, knew a great deal about medieval history, at that point in time. And it's not because they fully understood it when they were little, it's because they experienced it.
Mhm.
Um, and they knew, exactly what it was. So,
I mean, how many people can seriously experience what's in the book? Really? Like,
yes.
yeah.
Well, and as you said, I think there's something and I never even thought about this, and it's probably not possible for everybody because of jobs
Right.
that adults have.
Right.
But,
Right.
what a fun experience to be able to
Yeah.
travel the world and see, or even just the United States and see how things are done. We did a lot of that too, going to factories to see how such and such was made. Um, and it just means more, actually seeing it done. I wish it had been popular or it was able to be done when I was that age. I think I really would have enjoyed it.
Well, just looking back, like reflecting back sounds very like wow, rich experience, of course. But I wonder because there are not many resources available around that time as a homeschooler, like how did you struggle a little bit, or like you didn't really struggle or any you didn't even have any problems for doing everything you have been doing?
Well, I think it would be I wouldn't want anyone to believe that you don't struggle. I think everyone struggles. I may not have struggled in certain ways because I am a I am a teacher by nature. Um, and I love the creativity of being able to see something come to life and a child or an adult get it, as you know from teaching coaching. Um, but I think what I did in order to overcome some of those struggles was reach out to the homeschooling community,
Mm.
which there was some community, and that's where some ideas would come from. Um, it wasn't until my children were older that the communities started to come together as, okay, such and such a parent is great at biology. So on Thursday, we're going to have biology. Um, that didn't happen until my children were grown. But I think that's brilliant. I really do, to be able to, if you have a subject that you don't feel qualified at, that there are people who are, and just sort of take advantage of that. Um, but I did also probably waste some money trying out different curriculums as well to try to find ones that fit. And I think one of the challenges is that you didn't necessarily find something that fit for their entire education. You'd have to keep trying. And that's probably not the most fiscally responsible thing to do, but I did find that was necessary. There was no one curriculum that worked for the entire time.
Anything else comes to mind?
For struggles, well, I think
Yeah.
there were the normal struggles of getting kids out of bed in the morning and things like that, but, those were the normal struggles. I really do feel as though, as crazy as it might sound, doing the uniform thing with our children really made clear that demarcation between playing around and doing what you wanted to do and this is school time. And I think it may sound crazy doing it in your own home, but it was very wise. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, were you feeling lonely? Because especially you said, like nowadays, like you said, some people do the, oh, I'm good at, teaching science, so I can exchange the hours with you teach writing, I teach science, to the kids, homeschool the kids. Nowadays, I hear a lot like that kind of story, but sounds like you didn't have any of those community type except the church group, some church group. So were you feeling any loneliness or like, did you have any moments like, oh, am I doing right? Like, is this the way it's supposed to be? I mean, you did the uniform thing, of course. But
Yeah. Well, definitely there's an aspect of it that can be a bit lonely. However, my experience was too that when you're working with, just your three children and their specific assignments, school was finished in a matter of a few hours. So there was plenty of time the remainder of the day before daddy got home and it was time for dinner, to have community. Um, but I think if, in hindsight, I certainly would have gravitated toward having someone else teach my child something and, just for just for interest and things like that. I don't know that I would say lonely because again, the school day didn't last from 8 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the
so
afternoon.
did
Like it,
they change after the school hours? Because they have
absolutely.
to, oh, really? Okay. So after school time is over, they change to the
Yep. After
regular
school
course.
time's
Okay.
over, they can go put on whatever they felt like putting on, and believe
Okay.
me, they did. And then, because those were what they would call school clothes versus play clothes, and they could put on whatever they wanted for play clothes. I mean, the
Okay.
beauty of it is the school clothes didn't get dirty all that often because we only had them to, be, and it wasn't literally anything more than a pair of navy pants or shorts or a skirt and a white top. So it wasn't anything fancy. We just went to the local Walmart and got those kinds of things. Um, but it was the psychological
Mm.
differentiation between it's time to be in school and it's time to go do something else.
Cool.
Now,
I
I
never
will
heard.
say that all three of them struggled a bit going into school, even though they went to private school, when they did in high school, because there is still wasted time, and they were much more used to finishing what they had to finish and then go off to something else. Um, they've obviously, as adults now, integrated, but I think they are better at managing their time, very definitely better at interpersonal communication, than what they would have been. I have no doubt. Yeah.
Wow. So, oh my gosh. So who or what supported you? Like, so like, let's say you didn't really feel loneliness, but uh, what's the philosophy or what's the kind of your motto kind of help to you? Like, oh, this is, I really, really want to homeschool. This is it. Like not many people are doing homeschooling, but this is it. Like, how did you come back to that mindset?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, we were certainly not supported by either set of parents, because it was different, and I don't think they fully understood it. Um, However, what is interesting is in the years as it went on, my parents in particular came to appreciate the results because they could take my children anywhere and not worry about them in the sense of how they would behave with other adults. And I still remember my grandfather um, being absolutely thrilled about having the children they were in a sort of a nursing home type retirement home that had a dining hall, and we would go, and my grandparents was just they were just pleased as punch to introduce the children to all of their friends in that location because my children behaved. They knew exactly they were used to being around older people and used to being around the elderly. And um, I think my parents, my mother in particular, was extremely pleased with the results, even though she wasn't supportive of the concept. But they weren't negative of the concept. They just didn't. It wasn't what people did, so they just didn't think it was. You know, why would you do that kind of thing?
Mhm.
Um, so we didn't receive either family support or really in a lot of ways even society support. Um,
That's why I'm asking, how did you
yeah,
keep your thing? Okay, no matter what other people may say, no, this is it.
yeah. Well, I mean, and you and I've talked about this before. I am a person of faith, so it was certainly a great deal of prayer. Um, and I think the other thing that really kept me going is I truly loved being around my children.
Mm,
So, which isn't to say that I didn't get tired and frustrated like every other human being, but it's something that I felt called to do.
mm,
Um, so, and I think one of the reasons that that's the case is because in my human makeup, I have always loved watching the light come on in someone else's eyes when
mm,
they get something. It's just that aspect of teaching I always loved. So there was positive feedback from just watching the children learn things. And that had to do because there just wasn't a lot of outside support. Not negative, it just wasn't support.
I'm a little bit surprised that you had that faith and that, you know, you felt this is it, this is my thing. I really love seeing my kids learning. However, you took them to the private high school. So could you tell me more about the transition between homeschooling to what made you decide, okay, it's time for them to go to the private high school?
Well, that was not something that I wanted to do, Chie. But at the time, my husband and I split.
Oh,
And so I think one of his arguments was that I don't think he wanted me to have that kind of um, consistent influence in the children's lives.
mm,
Um, so we put them in school. If I had to do that again, I would not do it. It would not be. I don't think that that is necessarily the best option. Now, was it awful? Um, I don't. I don't think so because I think the children had a solid foundation before going. But it's interesting because my mother certainly had a lot to say about the fact that children should be um, exposed to other children and things like that when they're in high school. I'm not really sure that. I'm not sure where that comes from and whether or not it's a positive thing. I don't know. If I'd had my choice entirely, I would not have sent them to school. But they did fine. They graduated. They all went to university. All three of them have advanced degrees. Um, so they were well prepared, and and they're all three very successful in life and have families of their own.
So when they went to high school, did you ever push them, or you have to study this, or you have to study this one more? Never. So you
Not at
said
all.
all of them have advanced degree. So even those advanced degree, you are not involved. It's their decision to have that advanced degree. Like I'm
Oh,
assuming
absolutely.
masters and everything, right?
Yeah, so my daughter has a master's in psychology.
Mm.
My oldest son has a master's in adaptive health and phys ed, which is actually for handicapped and autistic children. And my youngest has a PhD in law. So, and they all made those decisions on their own and funded them. So they my daughter funded her entire education. My youngest son went to law school on a scholarship. So, um, yeah, I think what I provided at that spot, well, at that moment, I certainly provided some income for them to help them a bit. But the other piece of it is, I think the foundation that I was able to give them was the ability to learn. And instead of having things fed to you, it was the ability to try to teach yourself and to learn how to study and to learn good habits, which I think is the biggest benefit of homeschooling them. You know, the it's a unique environment to be able to help your children to spread their own wings and fly successfully because they've learned to manage their time. They've learned to manage their learning, and they have largely made life's mistakes while they still live under your roof, which is the best learning environment.
In other words, you're saying that you can make mistakes, or like anybody can make a mistakes under the very safe environment. That's the biggest opportunity for like learning anything you
Agreed.
do.
Yeah, I think so. I think they have the opportunity, and it's interesting. But my husband and I have a counseling practice right now, and we many times tell young couples that allow the children some space to make some mistakes now while they're under your roof, and you have the opportunity to sit down and discuss with them what might you have done differently in this circumstance, and allow them to experience some consequences. Um, because their mistakes as they get older just get more severe and more costly. So this is the opportunity to do that, and it's one of the things I loved about homeschooling as well is that you have that opportunity. You've developed that relationship to be able to say, what do you think about this? Was this a good choice? Um, there were even times, honestly, Chie, that I had conversations with my children about what do you think would be an appropriate punishment for this?
Wow.
Where they have, they weigh in. And interestingly, a lot of times they're harder on themselves than I would be. But to me, those are all life lessons. You're going to
Mm.
parent your own children someday. And And actually, I have been blessed to see that my children that have children are parenting them very successfully, in a very loving, warm, but you need to toe the line kind of way.
Homeschooling too? Their own kids?
Not yet. They're too little. They're all too little.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. We're talking infants and toddlers.
Yeah, but are they thinking about?
I can't answer that. I don't know
Okay.
that question yet because remember when they get married, they bring in yet another dynamic.
Right.
And that's not something that I'm going to jump in the middle of just yet. I've learned as a parent, it's time to be hands off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So I think this is a big statement I heard. Many parents have struggled with, like how much, kind of like you said, what do you think is the appropriate punishment for this? Ask kids instead of we provide the options. I think many people, many parents especially, have a hard time to offer that kind of choices. What would you say? What kind of suggestions would you give parents about this?
Well, I would say, first and foremost, make sure that if you make a decision like that along the way, that you're doing it age appropriate. I
Mm,
don't believe that preschoolers or even many young elementary school children have the ability to weigh those thoughts adequately. Um, but, I mean, even the couples that we're counseling, they have a 6-year-old that, given a handful of choices, you know, can make some good decisions, not consistently, but she can. Um, as they get older, their mistakes tend to be a little more dramatic and tend to be more expensive. So, I've given my children a couple of options in terms of very hard choices to make, and none of them are appealing. Um, so I would say when the children are young and you are really fully responsible for everything that they do, allow the consequences to happen, even though we as adults want to protect them, and we as parents especially want to protect them. But as long as the consequences aren't um, death or the death or the harm of someone else, it's not a bad thing to allow children to experience some small painful consequences for them to learn.
mm,
It's not unlike what you and I have talked about in terms of coaching, where we need to allow people to be uncomfortable because that's where learning takes place. Um, I will be the first to admit that as a mama, that is a heart-wrenching thing to do. It is, I mean, many a tear was shed on my part because I wanted to protect them from doing dumb things. But I did learn age appropriately what and I am a firm believer that we as moms and dads grow as our children are growing. We learn more, we mature more, and so as our children are growing, we're learning a different type of parenting. But
mm,
it all comes down to, from day one, you're starting to slowly release the children and release your hands off of all of the decision making. Again, having said that, you can't say that in a vacuum because it's amazing how you can throw the same gene pool together 3 or 4 times and get 4 different human beings, you know? They're all completely different. But
right.
that's the beauty of it. Let it, see what they can handle.
Mm,
Um, As they're younger, you do want to maybe give them a two or three choices in terms of a punishment. But as they get older, um, they're going to have developed those skills. That's really what you want to do is develop the skill. What's an appropriate consequence slash punishment for this? Um, yeah, it's very valuable. Hard, but very valuable.
How did you learn? Like, you said you have been, your like human behavior, like nerd almost. You have been learning, but is there any recommendation of the books or resources like you learned particularly from?
No, I don't think so. I know that's not terribly helpful, Chie, but I'd have to go back and look at all of the things that I've read over the years. Um, so yeah, I don't know that I have a one singular answer for that at this point.
Sounds like you came up with this idea of giving a choice, giving choices even for their consequences, right? Like, what do you think is the appropriate punishment, a consequence for this, to let them think what's the best route for dealing with whatever they made a mistake or they had a problem. Sounds like you came up with your on your own.
Well, I think probably, I mean, to some extent. I mean, I wouldn't say it would be in a vacuum. It certainly would be as a result of some of the different things that I have read. One of the things that I've read a lot of is Henry Cloud, um, who wrote the original popular book called Boundaries. Um, and the concept behind that is really allow people to experience what they should experience as a result of their own behavior, and know that there's a difference between a consequence and a punishment. So a
Mm,
consequence would actually be kind of the natural thing that happens as a result of making a mistake. And
yeah.
sometimes the consequence itself is enough because that's enough for learning. But sometimes there is some direct, let's say, disobedience that caused the issue and then the consequence. And so you would be dealing strictly with the actual disobedience piece of it. Um, and I felt as the children got older that it was very valuable to not only separate those two, um, but also to help to determine whether or not there was additional punishment needed or if the consequence itself was enough. And the children needed to figure that out as well. I mean, that was a learning ground for them too. One of the things I wanted to do with that, Chie, is to make sure that the lines of communication with the children were always open because they were going to do things in their life that would have natural consequences to it, such as wrecking the car. And the car isn't going to just uncrumple itself. That's a consequence for doing something. But I wanted to make sure that there was a difference between consequence and discipline or punishment so that they would not so that they would always come back to me, or to us as parents, regardless of what they'd done.
Mm,
I didn't want the reaction to always be one of punishment. There could be, I mean, for example, if you wreck the car, okay, there's natural consequences to that. So now we have a couple of options in terms of punishment. Are you able to pay for the damage that was done? Um, or if that's not the case, what would be a an alternative punishment? Well, maybe being without the car for X number of weeks, or
Mm.
what kind of punishment might result from the fact that you have inconvenienced your brother, your sister, and the rest of us. All of that required some creativity, but there was still acceptance of the human being,
Mm.
just not the behavior. And I had one child that kind of got himself into into hot water in college, early on in college, and I was struggling with what to do as a punishment. And having a conversation with him, he came up with the idea of not doing something fun that he wanted to do as a result, which, I mean, that was a good thing to do, and it cost him, um, in terms of it was something that had an ouch to him, a punishment to him that um, made him not do it again. That's the learning.
So he learned himself, like by experiencing what he has done.
Yeah, and that was a separation from the actual consequences to the discipline of it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Like, you are not directly parenting, but that's the kind of natural consequence of how you parented so far, like,
Mm,
throughout their lives, so that they naturally came to the conclusion that, okay, this is what happened. This is what, you know, I went through. Okay, I will not do this again, or what, like something, whatever the situations are. So they can be their own problem solvers no matter what happens.
yeah, yeah. Very good correlation between that and coaching. Um, Very interesting. I had a conversation with a student a couple of days ago, and one of the comments that was made was that, wow, I should really apply this to parenting. And I said, well, you know what? That is the best thing you could do, um, is to allow them at their specific ages some autonomy in making those decisions. And if they're minor decisions like, I didn't get up in enough time to make my lunch, so I go hungry. Okay, you want those kinds of things to happen now rather than when when they're behind the wheel of a car,
Mm.
or things like that. So nothing will teach them faster than being hungry. Which is why I say that there needs to be, as parents, a clear distinction between the consequences and punishment. If the consequences are such that they are enough, um, then maybe just a discussion afterwards would be enough. But and again, I would say to people who are beginning homeschooling, that is not something that you do when they're little. At that age, they're not able to make those kinds of decisions.
Mm. So I'm looking at the time, 3 minutes left. What advice or suggestions do you have for new homeschoolers or parents who might have anxiety about this, idea of
Mm.
homeschooling? You just mentioned a little bit.
Well, I think first thing I'll say is I'm always available. If anybody wants to talk about it, I'm always available. Um, and you have my contact information. Second thing I'd say is try not to sink into the anxiety of it before you've actually done it. I'd say jump in and, commit yourself to a semester or
Mm.
commit yourself to this particular school year and do it and realize that, you're not going to be perfect at it. Your children are not going to be perfect at it. You won't regret the kind of relationship that you'll develop with your children. Um, but don't look at it, and I say this just to coaching clients all the time. Don't look at this as a one-time decision that you've got to make for life. Just do it a bit at a time, see how it goes. You'll have to make changes. Curriculum isn't one size fits all. Children are not one size fits all. Um, and remember that you're going to grow and mature as they grow and mature. And thank you. It was fun.
Anything else?
That's it.
Oh, beautiful. So how and where can we reach you? Like I know you have personal contact information, but could you tell us more like how people can reach you?
They can get on my calendar, and I think that is calendly.com/puzzle, the digit two, and purpose. So
Do you have your
calendly.com.
own specific company name or like do
Yes,
you
puzzle to
oh, okay.
purpose.
Yeah.
So it would be calendly.com/puzzle to purpose. So they certainly can. And I'd be
Do
happy
you
to come and speak to your group or something sometime if you'd like that.
Wow, yes, gorgeous. Thank you. Wow,
Happy
what an
to.
offer. Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Carol. Wow.
Sure.
It's wow, seriously, like it's such an honor and privilege to be able to listen to your homeschooling stories. Like, thank you so much, Carol, for
Well,
coming
thanks for
today
having
and
me.
taking your
We'll
time.
chat. You're welcome. We'll chat soon.
Yes, again. Yes.
Yes. All
Thank you
right. Take
again.
care.
Yes, you too. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Bye, Carol.